following interview is part of the USMC Vietnam Tankers Association History Project. The interview is being conducted at the VTA reunion in St. Louis, Missouri, September 24, 2017. Interviewees are members of the VTA. The purpose of the History Project and the interviews is to capture the experiences of our Vietnam veterans and make them available for future generations.
Stephen Lyle Patton, Sr. I was 25 when I went in, and I served at 3rd Tank Battalion 67 and all of 68. I did one extension, actually was on a second, but they sent me home. And what I've written several things, but this story I want to do this morning is really struck me hard all at the time, and I had a very unusual job. I was optics, turret, electronics, hydraulics of the tanks. I was trained to be an optics man. It was supposed to be about 15 of us to take care of that job for the tanks. And for 9 months I had it all by myself. And actually went OPCON to the Army on 2 occasions to do their tanks because they didn't have anybody. But that gives you a little background on it. But I had to travel all over the DMZ. My tanks were spread out, 5 to a position. And so I would take off in the morning, jump on a convoy that was or a road sweep, go to Con Tien, come back and do Camp Carroll, the Razorback, and just keep working up the road to Khe Sanh. And I would inspect every tank, had a regular form for it. I would order stuff that I needed for that. Every night I would either go in with the maintenance chief, or I would be on the radio to him, and I'd tell him what to do. We had a great big board in his little bunker, and he could update everything and keep track of it. Well, Khe Sanh had always been a problem, but at this time you couldn't go in or out. I mean, it was tough, and I had a flame tank control that I was trying to get in there. Actually, since I left for my leave, and I missed Tet Offensive, the day I came back in January, this little tank control, this flame control was laying on the floor in the little, we didn't get tickets to move around, but at Dong Ha they had this little building there. And one of our guys, a tank, this is hard for my,
That's okay.
it's gonna work.
Yeah.
You know, I'm getting lessons at Palo Alto for dementia. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this kid was gonna do it, take it up. Well, they took artillery on the top of the building and sliced him open, and so he was at the hospital ship, and the control was laying on the ground all bloody, and I said, asked the guy, and he told me about it, and I said, well, I'll take it, and I took it, and next morning I was off trying to get to Khe Sanh. What I did was I had a pass that got me on anything that flew, so I would go over to the fuel dump, the best place to catch rides. And the gunnery sergeant there, he got used to me, and he'd tell me, oh yeah, it had a Jolly Green come in, and he goes, this one's gonna pick up a bundle and drop it at Khe Sanh. He says, if it's clear, any chance, he's gonna set down, because they have, I think he said something like 80 or 90 people in the hospital there, and they'd been there for almost a month. Couldn't get them out. So away we went. Opposite me in the back of this thing was a Army pay officer, a young black man, and he was dressed to the nines. He looked like he was in Hawaii, and no weapons, no nothing, no flak jacket, no helmet. And I mean, at that time, you lived in your jacket and your flak, you know. And so I asked him what he was doing. He says, oh, somebody had a complaint on a pay issue, so they sent me up here. And I says, well, if you get back, you ought to go over and punch that guy right in the mouth, because you're going to have one hell of a time. So we get up and we're approaching Khe Sanh. There's a big ravine, a valley, actually, and you swing out over it and you're coming in. I'm looking out the window. They didn't have seats in this thing. It was just empty, just the racks on the wall. And I see all these tracers coming up at us. I go, whoa! And this was anti-aircraft. It was no little gook, and it was a big thing. And I go, wow. And then all of a sudden, we kind of did a rock, and a little hole comes through the floor, up through the top, and hydraulic starts flying around, and vibration set up. I took off part of the blade. And so we're about a mile, probably a mile from Khe Sanh. And the guys did a beautiful job. They did a power down and just right in. We bounced all at 20 foot, maybe more. And then the landing gear collapsed and everything. We just kind of sat there. And the gate was already down because the hydraulics had gone out. So I'm sitting there on the floor, probably was unconscious. And I shook my head, looked around, and grabbed my gear, just like I always would. And the crew was already gone out the back. I never saw him come out of there upstairs or anything. And this young black boy was he was gone out. So I ran over there and shook him and got him to kind of come right. I says, now, we're going out this back door here, and we're going to run across this tarmac. It's full of holes. And I says, all you do is follow me. And if I jump in a hole, you jump in the hole. I says, because I'll hear the guns firing, and they'll have that round on us in a second and a half. So we're ripping across there, and we hit holes 3 times before we got to the trench along the it was monsoon time, so there was about that much water in the trench. This guy was so sparkling clean and polished shoes, and he hit that mud. And he was scared, and I don't blame him. I was scared too. And so we head down the trench to where the hospital is, and then you hang a right, and that's where my tanks were. And then down at the end of that is where the dusters were, the quad 40 or whatever, yeah. And that's what he was going to see, And so he goes down through the water, and I went over and did my repair work for that night, and got a little sleep, and then worked the rest of the night on the tanks. And then in the morning I needed parts, and there was a tank just outside the wire, and they said it was pretty clean. So I took a guy with me who knew the path through the minefield to get there, and I looked it over real good. There was a tripwire running off the tank commander's hatch, so they'd been in. I said the gooks had been in there, so I get up and we cleared that up, and I looked in, and the parts I needed were there, and it was a linkage that went from a computer next to the gunner, and when he turned that dial, it would adjust what round that they were going to fire, and that at what speed it was going to do, so it put super elevation on the gun. And so what happens was, I think sometimes it's done on purpose because it's a good way not to go out on an operation. It's all beautifully painted white and immaculate in there, but they don't oil it. And if it freezes up, the gun tube doesn't move. And it happened several times. It was during critical times. So at that particular time, it's the second time it had happened, and I had the gunner with a bucket of WD-40 with that underwater, under fluid, wiggling it until he got it clean enough that it flowed. And then, so I got some other parts, and then we went back in and I repaired that tank. And now I wanted to get out of there. Still nothing had come in. So in the morning I got over about before sunup in the trench waiting, and it's about 10 o'clock, and it was heavy rolling clouds, and I heard a plane, and there was little breaks in the clouds, you know how it is, and it was a low ceiling. It wasn't as high as the mountain there, and all of a sudden here comes this Marine Corps C-130, camouflage. And it just like it floated out of the sky or through those clouds, set down on the runway. And no Grace running back and forth or anything. He was just down and in. And this was, the runway is say over here, off toward that ravine. And then there's a staging area here that's where the planes would come. Boy, he hit that staging area, just flying, come in, made a couple turns, spun around, and it was back right up to the hospital. So before I could even pick my gear up, corpsmen are hauling stretchers out of that thing. And no rounds coming in. It was just dead quiet except for that C-130. And so I jumped up and hauled my gear over there and took it in this plane and then kind of tie it down because the floor had holes in it and that's the only thing that would hold it. And so about that time a corpsman runs in and hands me a bottle of plasma and he says, don't go out again. He said, just stay right there. I'm fine with that. I'm sitting there and they must have had at least 50 stretchers in at that time. There was 8 or 10 guys going fast as they could. I'm looking out the back of the plane right where, and I can see right down along the approach to the runway where the old buildings and where the old tower was and stuff, and that's all been blown up. Well, I see the tower go up in pieces again, and I see a row of rounds coming in, and I go, oh boy. It was about a click off from where we were. Well, thank goodness the pilot was paying attention too, and he saw it. So by the time the next round started coming in, he spun around and headed for the runway. Hit the short end of the runway and very unceremoniously just threw on his jets on his wings, and we ripped down there. The back end was still down, of course, and there was, I gotta estimate there was 60 people in there. Remember, there's a lot of people like me that were trying to get out of there too. And so here we go. Well, everybody's sliding toward the back. So a couple of guys in the back got their feet down in where the back came up and made a raise, kind of held it, and I had my piece tied down. And it happened so fast. And as it goes out and turns, I'm looking right back where we were. And all I see is stretchers up in the air, just slow motion. They hit directly where they were loading it. And we'd have been gone too, because we were right in line. And it was so slow motion that you just, did that really happen, Yeah. So then he spun around and took off. And the last thing I saw, the gate wasn't up yet, and there was the antenna on the tank that was the security at the end of the runway. We clipped it off, and it's just floating up in the air as we take off. So we get up in the air, and it's pretty quiet. Actually, it's almost dead quiet, even for the motor and everything going on the jets. I mean, that's a roar and everything. And then you get to a speed where you're not breaking the sound barrier, but you're pushing it behind you. And it got quiet, and we were up to elevation and heading for Da Nang. And nobody said a word. I'm sitting there just in a daze, and everybody else was too. And you kind of look around, but nobody said anything. Nobody made eye contact. It was, the same thing. Did this happen? We're alive. We're out of there. But what about our brothers? It's just so hard. And
Was the ramp all the way up and closed?
not until we were airborne at elevation. It's still coming up. So then we were at Da Nang in like 20 minutes. Swings around, lands at Da Nang at the hospital, and here's all these guys coming out, taking the guys out. And my job was so unique that I was always by myself. At first, they wanted me to get a driver to take me to all these places and stuff. It never worked. I could never find anybody that was as that would get up at 4 in the morning and go do these things. And then if I'm out somewhere, that's where I slept. If there was food there, I ate. If it wasn't, I didn't. So it's the only way I could keep all those tanks running and not having problems. So I'd get off the plane, and it's starting to get dark, and I didn't want to spend the night there. I wanted to get back to Dong Ha, my base. And so there was a Caribou, which is a French plane, a little plane with high wings, very slow flying, couldn't fly at 30 all day, and always with the South Vietnamese pilots in it. And it was all, there wasn't another military other than some South Vietnamese and some ROC Marines, and all the rest were villagers with their pigs and their chickens and all their stuff. And this menageries in there, and I just stepped in the door, walked up, sat down behind the bulkhead from the pilots, and I had a knack of going to sleep whenever I wanted. And I just pulled it down, flak jacket and helmet, go to sleep. Always woke up on approach. And that was 2 years of that and hundreds of flights. It's amazing. I would do 5 flights a day. I know I flew more than the air wing guys did.
What Marine tank unit were you with?
The third tanks,
Third tanks.
the H&S company.
Your
And we started,
Headquarters was where?
headquarters started when I got there in January '67, was at Da Nang. Then we moved to Phu Bai. And then 20 of us went to Dong Ha as a forward maintenance group. And early on, I'd gone up there with my warrant officer, Hiring, who was our maintenance chief. And him and I flew to Dong Ha, took a Jeep, and went all the way up there. And he knew the guy that had the plantation because he'd been there a long time. And it was a very interesting trip. Mon-yard women running down the road with nothing on, carrying 100-pound logs on their head, and friendly. Everybody was waving, and there was no activity up there at that time. Dong Ha was just being kind of put together, and so that's how I really got familiar with all of it to cover the area, and that's what he was doing. He felt that if you got a tank retriever going out of the park to pick up a shot-up tank, wherever it is, a lot of the things I could fix. If it had a hydraulic blow, I can put a new fuse in it and get the pressure up and get that guns running and everything. And anything optics-wise, replace glass and stuff, or patch it up and make it work. And so that's kind of how I did it. And I thought a little different about it after this experience, and I only had about 2 months to go and was considering extending again, but we'd had 4 guys come in. Optics guys, there's only about 30 in the Marine Corps at one time, and the classes are about 30, 35, but they're lucky to graduate 5 or 6. Really, especially during Vietnam, it was 6 days a week. And 5 nights a week, and if you missed three tests, you were out. So but you had to know it to do it. So I went there to be an armorer, and they took 5 of us out of the armory class and put us in there. So, but I never have met anybody that was on that plane or even familiar with it. And I was hoping maybe by the stories I'd hear from somebody that experienced that.
That's great. Amazing.
It was a fun times until those kind of things happened.
Well, being that independent and basically on your own.
I don't know of anybody except maybe a sniper that had that kind of independence. As long as I called my CO, my maintenance chief, every night on the radio or within reason, and told him where I was and what I'd done in the day. I was going up the road to Camp Carroll about this same time, and I'd got off the convoy that came out of Dong Ha. Well, this was just after Tet, and I'd only been there a couple of days. And they had changed the arrangement. Usually the convoy would split at there, and half would go up the hill and the other half would go on. Well, when I got there, I was on the back of the convoy, and so I jumped off. A couple vehicles went by and nothing. And so I'm standing out there on the corner. It's about 3 o'clock, and the road is bare going up there. Usually it had Arvins and little encampments up the side and a lot of stuff going on that road. And there was nothing. And I thought, holy cow. I didn't realize right away I was on the wrong end of the convoy. The front part went up. So I started walking up the road and got up there. I don't know how long that is. That had to be 1.5 miles or so to the top of Carroll. And I started getting into where it was kind of curvy. And I came around a corner and I saw some movement up above. And probably 100 yards, that'd be about right. And I saw about 10, 15 troops digging and picking, looked like they were picking something up off the road, maybe fell off a truck or something. And, but these guys were real clean, green uniforms with a pith hat and a star on it. And hardcore NVA. And I'm thinking, well, man, off the side of that road was always bugged until the Arvins came in, and they were supposedly had cleaned it up, at least where they had their little hooches every 200 yards. And so I look up there and I go, damn, I don't really want to go by there. And within a half an hour, they had finished what they were doing, planted a mine, and were worked off over the side. And I'm sitting there, and I think, well, here I got to make another decision. You know, I got toolbox and guns and all this stuff. And there's a noise just as I started to walk around. And I heard this noise, and oh man, a truck's coming. I'm going to get a ride.
A friendly truck?
Huh?
A friendly truck?
Oh yeah, it was. And it was like a, 5 tons so big. This thing was like a 15 ton. I don't know exactly what it was, but it had a driver's area and it had a flat bed in the back. But 6 guys could sit across the front of it.
Wow.
And it had, overtime. And 6 guys were in across there, and they pulled right up alongside of me. And the guy on the right on by the door, and he goes, "Hey, Marine, what the hell are you doing down there?" And I says, "Well, I'll explain that later." I says, "But there is some NVA up there about 100 yards. They've planted a mine." And he's kind of, "What?" He got on the horn, tanks coming off the hill, and they ended up killing over 30.
Oh, wow.
It was a whole bunch of them working out. They were going to hit the place. And then within time there, they had Tet and they did all that other damage. And so I get up the hill, and it's this guy sitting there. I recognized him right off. And in boot camp, the CO was General Hockmuth. And I got to know him because my drill instructor was becoming an officer. And him and Hockmuth had been buddies since elementary school. So he says, "I'm gonna have Hockmuth give me my bar today." And he says, "We'll have him do you guys too," because I was a squad leader. So we had the 5 of us. So we go in this little room, and he introduces us, and they pin us all up, and everything. It was a great experience. And then here we are. I meet him, and really wanted him, and he talked to my boss, gave him hell for me being on the road, and we finally explained it to him. It was the only way we could do it. And then it wasn't 2 weeks later, he was killed.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate it. It's a great story and exciting time. Your independence out there and as an independent operator was amazing.
And I think what helped me there, I was 25. I'd been married, divorced, and had a couple businesses, and I was pretty independent when I got there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.